Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Another fantastic gameplay and I really enjoyed this one and I think you will as well. Now, I haven't been doing leagues, unfortunately. Money's been a little bit tight for me, so I haven't been getting into as many leagues as I would like to, but I have been playing a lot in the JFF lobby and the competitive lobby. I usually jump between the two when I'm looking for a game or hosting games. Alright, so this is the Tana and Timna list that I've been working on, and I have reached out to the Lab Maniacs, whose link to their channel will be left in the description down below. Some excellent content from Multiplayer Commander if you want to check them out. Okay? But I've joined their Discord and going to be reaching out to some of the creators for the Blood Pod deck to try to get their take on the 1v1 aspect of it. So should be fun, but so far I think it's going in the right direction. The biggest, I think, difference between the multiplayer lists and the 1v1 lists, and this is me personally thinking, is not having access to survival of the fittest. I think that is such a blow to this deck because it means you can't do combos where you go get your Iona and that or various shenanigans. Usually Elesh Norn, I think the list play is the actual choice, but you can't go get Elesh Norn and drop it in the graveyard and then cast Reanimate, because you need your Fauna Shaman to do it, and you have to untap with your Fauna Shaman. It's more fragile than survival. You don't get to play Entomb in 1v1. So I think that's the biggest difference, is the ability of Survival of the Fittest to just find combos virtually out of nowhere, because you drop a creature, you tutor for Karmic Guide brings back the creature. It just keeps going the way that's set up, and or you go get Eternal Witness brings back one of the creatures, you dump that creature to go get something else. You've put a 2/1 into play for nothing, for no card disadvantage effectively. And it just aligns. And the ability to find what you need to find immediately, I think, is one of the better things about Survival of the Fittest, and that this deck sorely lacks in comparison. That said, the deck is still quite a lot of fun, and I've been enjoying playing it, and I think you're going to enjoy this gameplay. So without further ado, we'll jump over to it. You'll notice I've updated my avatar. I've went with Stang. I like the soldier art for it. All right, so my opponent is playing Stonebrow Crozan Hero, and I jumped through the first hand. My apologies. The first hand was rough, I believe, if I remember correctly, that it was rough on the colored mana. Like, it didn't have the right types. And I feel a lot better about this hand. I have a turn 2 Bob against a deck that should be able to deal me a lot of damage, but not early game, theoretically. So I feel pretty good about it so far. I have Jitte for the creature matchup, and I have an Arbor Elf to wield the Jitte, so that way I don't have to risk Bob. Furthermore, this can offset the life loss of Ancient Tomb and Dark Confidant himself, and I'll be able to play Timna and attack with Bob in sequence. Or I can, if my opponent has something, I can play and equip Jitte in the same turn that I would have been playing Timna. So I like how this hand develops. So I'm going to keep, my opponent keeps their 7, I believe, and I believe I top the Sword of Feast and Famine because, yeah, I do, because my opponent is on a green deck, and I like having that +2/+2 pro green. In addition to the Disrupting Scepter on my opponent every turn. They go with a Copper Myrrh. Very interesting. I pick Patronosphere. Not exactly what I would have liked to draw. I would have loved to draw a Forest there. That would have been fantastic. So that way I can turn this Arbor Elf on. But I'm going to stick on the plan of playing Bob and going development, and I'm just begging my opponent to tap out because that gives me Timna or Jitte trigger. And right now I'm thinking I might want a Jitte trigger instead of the Timna because I can kill off this Copper Myrrh and stunt their mana development. And that's all my opponent's been doing, so if I stunt it a little bit, that's great. My opponent does exactly what I was hoping, puts a Bow of Nylea into play, so I'm going to slam this Jitte into Dark Confidant. This also lets me start building up counters to keep other 1/1s out of play. That said, my opponent has Bow of Nylea to put a +1/+1 counter on creatures in response to this Jitte's ability. So I have to keep that in mind. My opponent, to their credit, just slams Stonebrow, thinks it should be great, right? I mean, you got a 4/4 to my 2/1. It might be a 4/3, but I don't think my opponent would trade anyway. That's a tough call. Like if I just attack with Dark Confidant here, what does my opponent do? Do they block, let me pump Dark Confidant to a 4/3? I've gotten 2 cards off Bob already. I've gotten Aethersworn and Stoneforge that my opponent knows about. Do they let Stonebrow die to Dark Confidant and give me 2 counters just like that? Like, what can they possibly do here? But instead, I decide I'm going to turn on my Arbor Elf and go get a Forest with this Polluted Delta. And I'll just take a play and equip sword here. Because I have 2 options of either drawing a card with Tymna, / forcing them to block and trading, or I can get a sword equip. I mean, that said, I can play Tymna and Stoneforge pre-combat if I want to, or I can leave 2 open. I'll naturally play the Jeweled Amulet no matter what. Alright, so I go get the Bayou, and I go with the sword here, because I'd rather Disrupting Scepter my opponent guaranteed and get all my lands back than potentially trade Dark Confidant or potentially get a card. It feels like I'm giving my opponent too many choices. I'm acknowledging that I'm going to have to take a hit from Stonebrow here. And it's what I'm accepting. So I play Arbor Elf, play Jeweled Amulet, and I believe, yeah, I throw out Tana here to be mana efficient. Because if I get a sword trigger plus Tana, I can ignore Stonebrow for most of the game. And that's my thought here. If Tana survives and I get Sword of Feast and Famine, I'm in great shape. My opponent does have Hunter's Prowess. So very cool. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. So they go in with a 7/7, which will become a 9/9 on attack. Pretty powerful. So as much as I would like to get the Tana ability, I just have to deal with Stonebrow as much as I possibly can. And mitigate how many cards my opponent's going to get. And I'm only throwing away 1 creature here. And it feels bad throwing away 1 and they get to draw 3 after I use my Jitte. I'm going to shrink it all. Because every Jitte counter I remove there is 1 less card my opponent gets to draw. They still pick up 4 cards from that whole exchange, which is absolutely brutal. But there's 1 card in my hand that will prevent, or 2 cards technically, but 1 better card that will prevent them from deploying that massive hand all at once. They do go land Skullclamp, so I'm going to slam Bloomtender first. Get in with Bob. Charge Jeweled Amulet when I see my opponent has no effects. Not that they would. You could play Pact of the Titan. Gotta acknowledge that possibility. So I charged white because it's one of the colors that this hand tends to want. Plus I'm going to have Tymna that I need to deploy soon. And I believe I Diabolic Intent my Bob away because I'm down to 6 life off that attack. And I just go straight for swords. I have to keep Stonebrow out of play. And my opponent tapped out is the time to do it. And I have just enough to deploy Canonist after taking 2 off my Ancient Tomb. So I go to 5 life against this deck. But Canonist might let me survive because it restricts how much my opponent can cast in a turn. And you'll see it in a moment, I believe. Alright, no, not this turn. They play a Terror Stomper, an 8/8 Trampler. And I pick up Sire, and I do a lot of thinking with Sire in my hand. They have Trample, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it costs 3 life to put that into play, putting me down to 2. Bloomtender taps for 4. I can equip Jitte and Sword to Sire of Insanity, and then just say go. And so I would then have a 8/6 pro green, Jitte'd up Sire of Insanity. My opponent would have no cards in hand. I would be at 2 life, but 2 counters are on Jitte, so virtually 6 life. Do I do it? And I'm not sure. I really don't know. I decide this turn after a lot of thinking. You'll see minutes lob off my clock a little bit. That I'm going to go with Tymna instead. And the reason I'm going to go with Tymna is because it gives me this sword trigger. Well, I truthfully, I could do both. I can't do both because the lands cost me life. So Tymna gives me 1 additional mana off Bloomtender, so she only cost me 2 virtually. and I get all of it back from the sword. So I get in, I Disrupting Scepter him away. I Scuttle Mutt, not that it matters. I make a lot of mana. I decide that I decided not to make that much mana. I'm being very careful. I don't know if you can click undo when you tap Ancient Tomb, because it's a... oh, I guess it's not a triggered ability. And I decide I'm going to move everything on to Tymna, because I can pump Tymna to an 8/8 after all of this. She has Pro-Green, and she has Lifelink, so I can gain 8, block the 8/8, gain 8 life, kill this, and no trample damage. And I would get 2 more counters on my Jitte. So I feel like this is a better line here. Now, I could deploy Stoneforge and go down to 1, but it feels dangerous. If he can trample over for 1, I don't know. And remember, all of his attackers have Death Touch. So any blocker I have must have the sword on it. Because the way that Death Touch and Trample interact is if they would deal 1 damage to my defender, that is sufficient to destroy it. They may then assign the rest of their remaining damage to the defending player, or Planeswalker. However, if something has protection from green, like Sword of Feast and Famine grants, you cannot assign lethal damage to the blocking creature. Therefore, no trampling damage can be assigned to the defending player or Planeswalker, because you have not assigned lethal damage. There is no amount of damage that you can deal to the defender that is lethal. Because you don't assign damage. It's or protection doesn't prevent damage from being assigned. It prevents the damage itself. So very weird rules interaction. But if you attack with a 10/10 in 10/10 green creature, and I block with a with Trample and Death Touch, and I block with a 2/2 protection from green creature, you deal no damage to the defending player, despite the discrepancy between their power and toughness, because you cannot assign the extra damage. There is no excess because you can't deal excess damage. There's no amount that you can deal to destroy the creature. You got Snake Umbra, Basilisk Collar, which I think was a mistake. You already have Death Touch. Lifelink isn't that much of an issue for you. Bow of Nylea might have been better because it's like 1 more +1/+1. It's a +1/+1 counter instead of Lifelink. I don't know. It's a tough call. But Snake Umbra, Skull Clamp. All right, 10/8 coming in. All right, I'll block, pump. Unfortunately, he did deal damage to me. I'm not sure. Now I'm double thinking or rethinking that, because I don't believe that's correct. I'm not actually sure. All right, I move everything over because I need Tymna to block. I just must have Tymna blocking. I feel very strongly about it. So I Stoneforge up a Skull Clamp, crash in. I just believe all right, that was weird. All right, so let me walk through what just happened. So I'm at 1 life. I attacked with Aethir Storm Canonist, triggered Tymna the Weaver. I did not pay 1 life. Did I trigger Jitte? No, Jitte is 2 from the block, 2 from the attack. So this is the correct number of counters on Jitte. I gained no life that turn, but I still drew a card off Tymna. Maybe that's a bug on Moto. Huh, I didn't think I drew a card here. I played this a little while back, but very interesting. All right, so I gained the life anyway. So let's say I'm at a virtual 2, because there's no way that I would give up the card on Tymna, I think. Especially when I have theoretically enough mana and life to activate Ancient Tomb and move everything over. And do I put Skull Clamp into play? No, I don't. All right, so I'm at theoretical 1 here. I should be at 1 less, I believe. Kamal Pit Fighter attacks me, or tries to bolt me. I will Jitte in response, so I should be at theoretical 1. So I would need to use 1 more counter off my Jitte, going up to 2, going up to 3, up to 2, and I have 1 counter on Jitte. So Tymna would be a 6 power attacker. All right, 9/7. I pump. Now, if this trample thing still works, as it did 2 turns ago, or on my opponent's last turn, I should die on this attack, I believe. And this is what makes me think of that Death Touch interaction, because Bow of Nylea gives it Death Touch. It's an attacking creature. So I pump up to 8. So I will gain 8 from the attack. No. Alright. So I gain 8 from the attack. He deals 1 to me. Oh, I see how it is. I gained 8, but my opponent trampled for 8 because of Basilisk Collar. That's how this is working. For the previous turn, my opponent trampled for 10, and I gained 8. And I soaked 1 off Tymna, so it was 9 trampling, but I gained 8, so I lost 1. Alright, I've now understood the rules a little bit better. See, isn't it great? Isn't stack interaction, or not even stack interaction, non-stack interactions in Magic the Gathering fun? And instantaneous effects. Alright. Eternal Witness. Seems decent. Let's Skull Clamp first. And now that my opponent's board is clear, now I'm going to go aggressive with Tymna. Pump her up. I risk dying to something like Bolt here, but I feel safe enough about it that I just need to go in. There's no way I can not go in here. I'm going to charge once I see he has no effects. Jeweled Amulet didn't do too much this game. Pick up a Reanimate, not great. So let's Sandbag and not lose the game. I'm going to Eternal Witness back Swords to Plowshares, keep this Mana Confluence open and pay for it. I'm going to move Jitte onto Stoneforge, and I believe that was the only thing that I moved. Yeah, I do. I keep a Sword on Tymna because I really don't want my opponent to have exactly Beast Within targeting Tymna because it's my lifelinker. I would rather him target something like Sword of Feast and Famine. Because I have this Reanimate, I can clamp Ewit, Reanimate Ewit, and get back anything else. Tymna, I would have to replay for 5, or choose to put in my graveyard and then just Reanimate her. Truthfully, I want to Sandbag this Reanimate. It's my get out of jail free card, and I don't want to have to spend it on Tymna. But if I need to, I'm willing to spend it on 2 cards and a new E-Witness and getting a Beast out of a Beast Within type effect. So I want my opponent to bait. I'm trying to bait a Beast Within type card. I believe it's only Beast Within is green removal on one of my other things. Furthermore, Crozang Grip is viable and could kill several things on my board. So it's also worthwhile to make sure Tymna is protected from Beast Within and Crozang Grip is live, even though that can't kill Tymna herself. All right, my opponent plays Silklash Spider, goes to Clamp, and instead of giving my opponent a 3 life, I'm just going to give them the 2 life for Silklash Spider's power. They've spent the mana on Clamp. That's all I cared about. I knew they weren't going to equip the Basilisk Collar anyway. He goes to tap and untap, and then I believe ends up using Bow of Nylea. Should have just put another counter on his Silklash and gained an extra life, I guess. So I pay some mana and Clamp the Ewit. And I decide now's the time that I'm going to go for it, because I can put my opponent so far behind on this turn alone that I feel pretty confident about. Were there more counters? No. I dump all the counters off Jitte onto Tymna. Crash into the red zone. Crunch. Get another card, get some life, get a land. Alright. Move the Jitte, move the Clamp. And I moved it this way because this allows me to kill Stoneforge Mystic and draw cards in response to something that my opponent's doing. Then use Eternal Witness to block and potentially still pump Eternal Witness if need be to 4 power and 3 toughness. Or gain 2 life off the Jitte if I so choose. And I do it that way because I don't necessarily want my Stoneforge Mystic to die, but if I'm going to say my board's going to be wiped, I'd much rather prefer to be able to only spend 1 Jitte counter and get 2 cards out of the deal, instead of having to spend more if it was somewhere else, theoretically, like on Tymna, because of the swords. Alright, my opponent taps a lot of mana. I think for a sec how much life I can gain. I can Swords my own Tymna, gain 4 life, and then I can gain 4 off Jitte. Or I could pump 2, up to 6, and then Swords this. Not very good. I really don't want Ewit in exile either. So that makes the most sense to gain 4, and then Swords for 4. Would be my line if my opponent has some kind of burn. My opponent does have burn in the form of Red Sun Zenith. And I make a comment in chat that he needed 16 to kill me this turn, which is pretty impressive considering I was at 1 several turns in a row. Tymna, just that lifelink is strangely relevant. Crash in for another 7. I got so much in the wings, but that is commander damage with Tymna the Weaver. Feels good. What a game. What a game. All right, so I learned a little bit about Trample, Death Touch, and Lifelink in this game, and thoroughly schooled myself, I guess you would say, once I figured out why one turn I took damage, the other turn I didn't. It was because of the 1 to this, gain off this, and trample over interaction. Very interesting, but definitely enjoyed the game. Definitely hope Aberf, A-R-B-Y-F, B-Y-H, Aberf, I don't know how to say that. ARBYH enjoyed their Stonebrow game. It looked pretty dicey there for a moment, but this sort of Feast and Famine can come in wildly potent. Because I think if I did not have that and I was forced to chump with creatures continuously because your attackers have Death Touch, I would very, very quickly have lost this game. Maybe this Sire of Insanity line might have been right. Put myself down that low in life. But I just felt so like it was such a big risk. Like if my opponent had another type of pump effect just to dump onto a creature like that giant thing. What's Wild Size? One of the first discards, I guess. Yeah, so if my opponent had any type of pump effect, I think I would have lost that game, and I think I'd rather play... Oh, no, they wouldn't top deck a pump effect, exactly, because they would have lost their hand to Sire. And I'd rather play around not losing the game. So, hope you guys all enjoy the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my content to anyone you think might enjoy it. And should be on screen now. If you want to support me on Patreon, you're more than welcome to. I'll be editing that a little bit in the coming weeks. It's been really busy lately, and I apologize for not having videos up as often as I would like, but I hope you guys get to enjoy the content that I do put out. See you all in the next one.